2023. The Future Sound of London have a new album ready to come out, the third and final part of the Environment 7 trilogy. And there are also several other FSOL releases due to be released that year. And those are the ones we'll be looking at this week on Earthbeat Visions, A History of the Future Sound of London. FSOLDigital presents 2023 calendar album. Release date 31st of January to 29th December 2023. Another year, another calendar. Released on 31st of January, some believe this might not be coming along at all, but FSOL came through at the 11th hour once more. This time Bandcamp was the only home for the record, meaning a slight inconvenience for anyone shifting over from FSOLDigital, having to download the full album each month rather than being able to download the individual tracks. For the second year in a row, I didn't listen until the end of the year and was very pleasantly surprised. In many ways, it's the polar opposite of 2022's album, with no one sound at all and a very broad range of tracks from clanging and cluttered beat workouts to smooth, groovy down-tempo, epic ambient techno to blippy IDM, and closing on two very different humanoid tracks. That said, it doesn't sound anywhere near as jarring as one might imagine, with a particular mood running throughout. Swap a couple of tracks out and add in some crossfades that it could easily pass for part of the Environment 7 trilogy. Track for track, it includes some all-time greats for the calendar series, including Clear Mass 4 and Vertical Reflections. It's up there with the 2019 album for me in terms of the best of the run, and I hope this gets a fully gapless mix one day. The Future Sound of London Input Gate. Welcome to the calendar album for 2023. Kicking off the year is the Future Sound of London Input Gate, recorded at 9L West Studios, engineered by Yage. Slow, chopped up beats, thick field recordings of insects chirping, rich, warm synths, muffled voices. There's more than a touch of the Environment 7 trilogy to this piece, but also something kind of different. Sounds are often thrown through dubby delays. The way the different elements fade in and out and morph over the piece's runtime is really intriguing and makes it constantly engaging. The embedded art features the album's cover with the title added. Future Sound of London, Ampoi. This month's calendar track comes from mid-2022, FSOL Ampoi. It's very easy to hear this track coming from the space of partial illumination sessions with the clattering metallic sounds used as rhythms, but the arpeggiated melodies hark back to more of the Environment 6 style as opposed to the more percussive approach used on that album. A nice track, but one that feels like it was always destined for the archives. The Future Sound of London Slow Photo. The calendar track for March is FSOL's Slow Photo, recorded 2017 at 9LW, engineered by Yage. Enjoy FSOLDigital. 2017 makes this music for 3 books era, which is not what this sounds like. The drums have a kind of smoothness that makes me think of 90s down-tempo chill-out music, not like anything usually associated with the FSOL name. I wonder whether it was recorded for a library music collection. Arpeggios and pads all over the track are a lot more familiar, but actually the kind of reminiscent of Environment 7.2 than anything. A real oddity though, and while not a classic, a type of weird out of left field track that I love the calendars for. The embedded art includes a 90s shot of the band. The Future Sound of London Ubiquitous. Howdy peeps, the April calendar track is taken from some sessions that were done for a production music release. The Future Sound of London Ubiquitous. Now, this is a library music outtake, and possibly the first official public admission that they even do library music. Not that you'd know it from listening, the sound not unlike that of Rituals with its murky production and slow, unsettling rhythms. Starting with 90 seconds of dark ambience and familiar field recordings, things seem to be heading into ethnic territory with a vocal sample before the whole thing is stood on by a punchy kick, hat and snare that don't so much create a rhythm as stomp around in an awkward fashion for 2 minutes. The ambience remains in the background with added pads and arpeggios, so everything is crushed to a pulp by the lo-fi beats. Brilliantly odd and oddly brilliant. The Future Sound of London Clear Mass 4. A spoken sample about land masses moving and pressure from steam ripping the earth apart opens this frankly not very optimistic track. Picking up where Ubiquitous left off, this too matches subtle atmospheric electronics with field recordings and gritty beats, although these are more in the lo-fi hip-hop territory. The field recordings play a large part in this track, while synths are limited to some sub-bass, a quiet drone and a lot of odd percussive noises. The spoken sample reappears halfway through just to remind us how the earth will be destroyed, before some very dark synth pads appear. Just when you've got a handle on it, totally different chords and an exceptionally fast breakbeat, albeit a very, very, very quiet one, close the track. I really love this one. It's got more than a touch of Environment 7 Trilogy to it, not surprisingly, given its 2022 recording date. It's also really new. The style of beats, the loud field recordings, the voice sample, the whole mix. It's one of those brilliant surprises, and one that I wish had turned up on a more conventional album. More like this, please. Future Sound of London, each and every one of them. Title, FSOL, each and every one of them. Created, Saturday 22nd July 2017, 1828. Location, Studio 2, File Yellow 7B, 90 West Studios. Just when you thought it was safe to leave the house, another blippy minor key IDM miniature in the Environment 6 style appears. It's good, but I never need to hear another FSOL track that sounds like this again. Presentation of the track info is interesting. We have a time of completion for the piece, just when the rest of the country are sitting down to watch Dad's Army repeats. The 9LW studios are active and spewing out FSOL material. Recorded at Studio 2, I wonder how many there are in Brian's home. And the file was Yellow 7B, which I'm sure means something to Brian, but not to me. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything to him either. Nice photo with the 5 logos too. Sound of London, Ritualist. FSOL Ritualist, one of 4 versions of Ritualized from the Environment 7.1 album. Even without the description, it's not hard to hear the origin of the piece. The beats are much more chopped up here, leading to something considerably more chaotic than the final album mix. The kick is heavily reminiscent of Mass XXXXX, while one of the chopped up beats has a wonderfully shouted voice cut into it, which brings an unusual but very enjoyable new texture to the piece. The violin through reverb atmospherics and pads of Ritualized make their way through the mix during much of the track. Great stuff. Meanwhile, in the artwork, a computer-generated beach is invaded by a metallic 8-legged alien. Future Sound of London, Seolk greater than A. Created 2nd January 2022, FSOL, Seolk greater than A. Recorded at 9LW, engineered by Yage, produced by FSOL. Yes, can't beat a very easy to read title, can you? On paper this one reads like the over-familiar bleepy IDM style, but the final product is incredibly different. The strangely tinny sound of the synths, both the arpeggios and the harsh pads, and the rhythms, which feel like they're leading up to a huge drop, spoiler, they're not, give it a really strange vibe that's just extremely hard to put into words, but can be best described as unique. Each texture is just different normal, kind of different how I can ever imagine making the track, and it never fails to surprise. The Future Sound of London, Vertical Reflections. Recorded 22nd of January 2019, Studio 9L West, engineered Yage, client FSOLDigital. Despite a very dark opening environment of what might be thunder, synth sweeps and a growling bass synth, Vertical Reflections isn't a dark piece at all. Indeed, it's utterly beautiful, wistful, airy and almost uplifting in a bittersweet way. Led by a plinky synth loop, there are atmospheric vocals which place the track as a sister piece to Artificial Placement of Emotion of Fledgling Sun. Meanwhile, instead of the usual skittering beats, this has a slowly building rhythm section that opens with quietly pounding tom-toms before textural, shimmering hi-hats appear. Over this come the vocals and some flute melodies. It's an utterly gorgeous piece. Despite being hugely repetitive, it never gets tiring. It's 7 minutes, it's one of the longest FSOL tracks of the era, and another that I can't believe didn't end up on a major album. The Future Sound of London, Oberon. Recorded 2014, produced by FSOL, engineered by Yage. The album's most playful track, this dates back to an era when Environment 5 and Life in Moments would have been at the front of the band's mind, which makes its skittering IDM sound quite surprising. With a stuttered beat and simplistic melody, it's no classic, but despite some menace in the melodies, the overall mood is much more fun than the rest of the album, making it a pleasant change of pace. Humanoid, Boignum Aquatic, recorded February 23 at 9LW Studios, England, engineered by Yage. Honestly, this could have been on a space of partial illumination with its fast beats, background pads and percussive synth gurgles. Intense and Purpose is a close cousin, despite one being humanoid and the other FSOL. There's a lot more going on here with many more changes, which might be how the artist's name was chosen. At 2.5 minutes it feels a touch too short, but a lot happens in that time. Humanoid, Lime Slip. The final track of the 2023 calendar is from Humanoid, Lime Slip 2020, engineered by Yage, recorded at 9LW Studios. Every calendar album has a track I don't quite understand on it. This is 2023's. My initial review on the FSOL board was 5 minutes of grumbling beats. Sounds like it was more fun to make than to listen to be honest. There are actually melodic elements that come in during the second half which add an unexpectedly haunted tone to the piece, so I was clearly not in a generous mood when I first heard it. Amorphous Androgynous, Tales of Ephidrina, 30th Anniversary Edition. Release date 22nd of April 2023. Lifeforms has remained in print on CD since release, but the double LP edition was difficult to get hold for a half decent price for many years. It was eventually reissued in 2018. Dead Cities had a similar fate, being made available again in 2021. There were hopes the same would be done for Tales of Ephidrina and ISDM, but they actually went one step further. For 2023's Record Store Day, Tales of Ephidrina was given the deluxe expanded reissue treatment. This is the first time an album from the band's back catalogue has been repackaged like this, and in many ways it's overdue, with so many of their contemporaries receiving similar expanded reissues. Now, of course, we've had 13 or 14 albums worth of archive material from them, so we weren't exactly starved for 90s outtakes, but even so, it's really nice to have Universal putting a bit more attention onto the band again. In an unusual move, but one clearly suited to FSOL, a CD edition was also released alongside the LP for Record Store Day. The 4 bonus tracks feature at the end of the CD and are featured on a separate 12-inch included with the LP. The music is remastered by Matt Colton. 2,000 copies of the LP were pressed, with 1,250 for the UK and 750 for the rest of the world. On the streaming release, neither of the entirely new pieces are available, fitting in with FSOLDigital's anti-streaming attitude. These two, Mountain Path and Static Field, are licensed from FSOLDigital, as the original album wasn't recorded as part of the band's Virgin contract, but as a bonus album, thus outtakes are also not included as part of that contract. The artwork is pretty much the same as the original, other than the added new titles, which is something which I fully approve. It's been a while since we had a tracklist fuck up, but one has finally arrived though. In this case, Mountain Path and Static Field are listed in the wrong order. Well done everyone. Mountain Path. Expected to simply be the Environment 6 track of that name, but actually not. This is another alternate version of Mountain Goat. It might be heresy to suggest, but I think this might be the best version of the track. Structurally, it starts out in very similar territory to the original, but the guitar builds up into more complex melodies with a shifting harmonic centre as it goes into a counter melody that ends up with the track feeling dramatically more emotive than the 1993 release. There was a rumour that the original would have received an album's worth of re-recordings at one point, and I can only imagine how good a release with Mountain Goat 2014, both Mountain Paths, I'm Eating Here and Forlorn would have been. Static Field. Onto the techno side of Tales of Ephidrina, Static Field was first heard on Touch Music Night 1 in 2015. The single note 303 line is incredibly similar to that of Podroom, suggesting the two tracks might be related. That aside, however, this is a much more tempo piece, breakbeats behind the fall to the floor, synthy sculptures over the top. Around the 3-minute mark, a brief synth melody comes in, providing respite from the largely rhythmic track, but departs very quickly. Not bad, and nice to hear a piece in this style again, but maybe not quite essential listening. Spoken samples from It's Not My Problem close the track. Skyscraper Extended. Instead of giving us the original Liquid Insects B-side, instead we get an extended mix, meaning the original track is still vinyl only. While the final 2 minutes of both are identical, the structure of the other parts is very different, with sections coming and going in different places, and this extended mix containing an entirely new section featuring what sounds like the same string sample also heard in the opening part of Smart System's remix of Nomad's Your Love Is Lifting Me. Quiet field recordings join the track with the following piece. Swab Alt. At some point in the past, Swab existed with a weird, repetitive, ravey melody over the top. The breakbeat piece suddenly takes on a whole different vibe with the weird, brass-esque synth tune playing over it, losing a lot of its more atmospheric elements and becoming clearly indebted to rave music. Structure is somewhat different to the original. I hate this version. Future Sound of London, Life in Moments. Release date, 22nd April 2023, LP, 24th April 2023, CD and download. In 2023, for the first time since 2016, Record Store Day did not bring about an entirely new FSOL album, simply a reissue. which wouldn't be much of an issue for most people as the original release of Life in Moments was only a few hundred CDs. So getting it as a much more widely distributed vinyl release with bonus track, followed by a general release of the CD version including a further 3 bonus tracks, was really welcomed by all. Given how much I gushed over this album in its initial video, it won't be too surprising to hear that I too was really happy Life in the Moments was getting wider recognition. Although starting life as a bonus disc, partly comprised of previously heard download-only bonus tracks, it really is a coherent original album in its own right, and as probably the most even collaboration between Brian and Gaz on any FSOL album since Translations, holds a special place in the band's discography. The CD and download followed a mere 2 days after the vinyl. For the LP version, the cover of the most important moments of a life and artworks is used, the 5 logos hovering above a shadow. The initial run of 1,000 machine number copies came with a white border on the cover. The unnumbered general repress changed the borders to black. Back cover features temple photography by Alan Dougans. The only logos featured here are the older lineup of FSOLDigital Exploding Head, Herd Killing, Curves and EBV. The record labels and CD disc art feature the EBV logo and Earthbeat Vision text. The CD cover is the same as the original release. The back features a new image, a grey texture with circles. The booklet reflects the most important moments book with a montage of images including, confusingly, one page suggesting the front cover was the original cover of Environments. Cloud photography features beneath the disc tray. The spine uses the same font as the Space of Partial Illumination, which looks a bit out of place if you have the CD in the 2015 section of your FSOL collection like I do. C and LSD is renamed to C and LCD for some reason. Track 5 is named Sonata Andantino on the LP cover and Sonata Akko on the CD. Don't ask. While this has become my go-to version of the album since release, with 4 strong bonuses and a more satisfying 54-minute runtime making this a strong enough album to go head-to-head with any of the environments, there is one caveat for me, and that is the moving of triospheres. The piece is in the same key as Bring and faded in so perfectly from that track that one could imagine they were composed to sit together on the album. Putting in the sonata after Bring and shifting triospheres to track 11 is maybe the most baffling creative decision since the final mix of the Isness. The remaining bonus tracks on the CD and download sit between triospheres and close a falling upwards aria. Sonata Andantino, also known as Sonata Akko. I have no idea why the CD and download versions are called Sonata Akko. A version of the Andantino, the second movement of Schubert's Sonata in A major, D959, was first heard at the end of the 4th Touch Music Night in November 2020, announced as being from Environment 7. Much as with just about everything else from Environment 7, it never turned up on it, but instead appeared as a bonus track on the Life in Moments reissue, the only one on the LP version, appearing at the end of side A. Though one heard on the Touch Music Night featured Morven Bryce on violin, but her performance is missing here, the track instead being purely electronic. A slightly harpsichord-esque synth plays the main sonata, of which choral haunted synths, my guess would be the synthy, add spooky atmosphere. The final minute brings in piano, the instrument the piece is originally composed for, before heading into layers of wobbly synths and hissing. Vinyl crackle appears throughout, while a field recording of birds plays in the middle. Domain, of course, reuses the melody from Pachelbel's Canon in D, so this isn't the first time classical music has appeared on an FSOL track, but for a fully credited arrangement like this to be featured on an album, it's definitely an unusual and new move. Wrestling. If the original release of Life in Moments was notable for being the most gas-forward FSOL record of the FSOLDigital era, then the addition of Wrestling only compounds that. Indeed, this could easily pass for an Amorphous track in places. A slow live drum loop starts the piece with acoustic bass and electric guitar licks and synth strings. At the halfway point, Amorphous vocalist Alicia Sufid arrives, and although her voice is louder in the mix than it would have been in the 90s, it's still passable as FSOL, and then in comes the main vocal melody, which it sounds like Gauss has joined Alicia, and then we get a guitar solo. Washes of ocean waves are brought in, but really this could be on the Isness. It is a beautiful and uplifting piece though. The bonus tracks from the Life in Moments reissue revert back to modern classical once more, with the string-led Held in Warmth. Not sure whether it's a Morven Bryce performance or more likely something sampled from a classical piece, but the strings loop over each other in a hypnotic manner, below which a dubby scraping noise comes and goes. Choral pads, or maybe samples, thicken out the piece's texture. In the final minute, instrumentation shifts to occasional parps and toots of woodwind instruments and a flute drone. A genuinely strange piece of music. Plant Life. 2 minutes of plinky synths, basically. This continues the warm, relaxing vibe from the previous two tracks, but in more overtly electronic territory. There's a decayed, warped texture to the various elements of the piece, adding a layer of grit which contrasts beautifully with some of the glassy tones also featured. As with the other bonus tracks, it's unconventional and wonderfully so. Hidden track. Oh, and once the album is over, FSOL generously supplied 90 seconds of grumbling, gurgling, mumbling sounds to enjoy. The Future Sound of London, Environment 7.003, also known as Where All Is Ending. Release date 24th October 2023, arriving a year after the second. Without multiple other projects in the meantime, the wait might have been difficult. Unlike the previous two volumes, there was relatively little build-up this time. The launch night for the third Mind Maps CD in late 2022 featured an exclusive mix featuring 2 tracks from the album, and another appeared on the Mind Maps 4 launch show, but otherwise we heard nothing at all. Even the record stores were behind on this one. The first we heard of it was on the 13th of October, with a pre-order appearing out of the blue on the FSOL Bandcamp. Immediately drew questions, most notably why was it called Environment 7.003 when the previous two volumes had proper titles, and why did the cover look suspiciously like the ISDN cover? When it first appeared on Bandcamp, some thought it was a temporary cover, much like the simple black and white one for the original Environments when that first appeared on FSOLDigital, while others thought it might be a sign that an ISDN reissue was on its way. As for the title, the Bandcamp notification referred to it as E7.3 Where All Is Ending, while the cover and Bandcamp page list it as Environment 7.003. I asked Brian and he informed me the title is actually Where All Is Ending. This is listed on the back cover of the CD underneath E7.03, but not even hinted at being the title on the LP or digital versions. As always, there are games at play here and nothing is ever done in the obvious way. The title itself caused a very mild panic that this might be the end of FSOL, but Brian confirmed to me that the plan remains for there to be 10 volumes of Environments, which, if the remaining versions all come out as trilogies, will mean a run of 21 albums in total. The only track made available to listen to on Bandcamp was One Solar Radius, which is almost hilariously inappropriate given that it's on neither the LP nor the CD, nor does it sound remotely like anything else on the album. You just know if ISDN came out today, it would have been previewed with Appendage. The assumption was that the final 2 or 3 tracks would be CD exclusives once more, and this turned out to be largely correct. Record stores got the information the following week, providing the grammatically odd blurb, going deeper and darker than the previous 2 albums, the flavour here harping back with memories of the group's 90s sounding pre-Dead Cities album. On this release they have swamp-laden electronics dripping from cavernous breakbeats weaving in and out of otherworldly chords and strings firmly back in the driving seat, and track runtimes suggesting just 2 short environmental pieces, with 2 tracks running to over 5 minutes and the rest all in the 4-minute range. The CD version runs to 57 minutes, the shortest standalone Environments is 5, although the inclusion of One Solar Radius does push it over the hour mark. ISDN does rear its head a few times on the album, especially on opening track Future Testaments. What's interesting is that if you look at the album from a distance, it's actually very similar to the previous 2 parts of the trilogy, with similar elements in the mix of mid-tempo, chugging percussive tracks, complex, blippy IDM pieces and acoustic tinged ambient interludes. but the vibe is so different. While starker than the previous two, it never feels sparse in the same way the calendar albums do, for example, instead having its own very distinct and enveloping atmosphere that remains largely consistent throughout. One criticism could be thrown at both Rituals on a space of partial illumination is that they felt a little disjointed, even with the atmospheric and beatless moments, struggled a little to capture the ambient soundscape approach of many classic FSOL albums. Here that is corrected entirely, with the very visceral environment felt throughout. First half of the record has a marvellous ebb and flow feel with rhythmic and ambient tracks toing and fro without jarring. The second side almost feels like a continuous piece at times, with similarities in rhythm and tempo, making tracks blur together brilliantly. This gives the record a real energy that picks up as it goes along, climaxing with the epic Quahu. As with Rituals, the CD bonus tracks feel less essential, though this time they are at least in keeping with the mood of the rest of the album. They're simply not quite as good, especially after things reach their natural ending. We get a touch of the 90s sound again, mostly with the daftly named I'm Eating here featuring mountain goat guitars, but in a couple of other places more subtly too. To call the artwork minimal wouldn't be going far enough. This is easily the most minimal art that's ever been on an FSOL release. Another simple 4-page fold-out booklet for the CD, the inner sleeve featuring a photograph of a woman and some trees overlaid with stripes, E7.003 and the 5 logos, the Earthbeat logo over the credits, and the track list on the back cover in the same style as that on ISDN, with a faint wireframe grid beneath the disc, further echoing that album. The LP features nothing but the typography plus the 5 logos in small on the rear cover. Brian's yet to explain to me the reasoning behind the ISDN art parallels, but they're clearly deliberate. Unlike that album, however, we don't get a rich booklet packed with photos and stories. This is functional at best, although stylishly put together and pleasing to look at. I really like Where All Is Ending. I'm not going to lie, by 2023 I was struggling with the worry that I might not be that into new FSOL anymore. While I can't fault releases on a technical level, I felt there were just too many that didn't quite do it for me. Between some of the disjointed calendar releases, the very polished IDM forward mind map sets, which aren't quite up my street at times, and generally just being overwhelmed by the huge amount of new material coming out every month or two, I wondered whether there'd ever be an album I just fell in love with completely again. Don't get me wrong, the previous 2 parts of the trilogy are very strong, but perhaps my own personal issues at the time, combined with so much new FSOL to get my head around, made them feel just that touch less special. But Where All Is Ending thankfully discarded all of these worries. This is up there with my very favourite environments, within 3rd place behind 2 and 4. In so many ways it feels like a successor to 90s FSOL, with the same coherent atmosphere throughout, a good mix of samples, instruments and electronics, and a few nods to how they sounded back then, but manages this without ever sounding like a retread. While sometimes modern FSOL releases push into territory I'm not keen on, I always support these decisions on the grounds that I believe artists are at their best when moving forwards, even if the results aren't always to our tastes. While Where All Is Ending might feel like a 90s FSOL record in many ways, the actual musical contents are rarely like one. They're just pieced together in a more familiar way than they were on, say, Rituals. The track title, A Desolate Night Road, sums up the mood of this one for me. A drive through the night, oddities glimpsed through windows and in occasional beams of light, comfort found within the warmth of the vehicle, the shapes of skeletal trees occasionally silhouetted against the moon, imagination bringing the strangeness of the moonlit world to life. An utterly brilliant album. Oh, and none of the tracks from the Mind Maps preview mix ended up on the album, nor did the Schubert Sonata or Northern Point. Future Testaments. By far the most ISDN sounding piece on Where All Is Ending, this, combined with the title, feels somewhat deliberate. A deep synth note and birdsong open things, but the piece is quickly disrupted by glaring noises and then punchy live drums and electric bass come in. A 21st century cousin of the Far Out Son of Lung, with layers of harsh atmospheres in the background, the comparison is completed at the 90-second mark with the arrival of some very familiar muted trumpet. Wailing synths in the background are more than a little reminiscent of Snake Hips. One wonders whether a Far Out Son of Lung re-recording was produced at some point but scrapped, and this might come from those sessions because it's so much like that track and ISDN in general, yet the synths and production are utterly 2020s FSOL. For many bands it might just be considered fan service, but with FSOL's strange mix of past, present and future, it's just another odd piece of the jigsaw. resting point. Does what it says on a tin. This second track is a breather after an intense album opener, something that wouldn't happen on ISDN. Warm synth drones, gentle rainfall, soothing male humming, reversed electric guitar, flute improv. The kind of sound that's not been heard previously in the E7 Trilogy, feeling closer to pieces on volumes 5 and 6, but with its own thickness and texture that's very much tied to the 2020s. Beautiful. A desolate stretch of night road. Back into percussion here, although this is programmed in that staggered way I always struggle to describe, but it's a sound that entered the FSOL world around the time of the Ramblings EPs. The piece opens with what sounds like owls hooting away in the dark before the beat fades in. Reversed synth notes overlay the first half of the track, allowing percussion to lead much in the way it had on Rituals and Space of Partial Illumination, with synths providing thick layers of texture in the background. They'd make for a superb ambient track in their own right, but are perfectly placed alongside the beat here. There are even tinkling bells from Eggshell. At 6 minutes this could get tiring, but worry not, there's development. Just past the halfway mark, the beat becomes bigger sounding, and new, much more melancholic synth pads appear in the foreground. While just playing chords, this is effectively a new melodic section. The atmosphere, suggested by the title, becomes incredibly vivid at this point. The beat begins to be more fleshed out again, forming a proper groove, and eventually fades away into a closing environment of gurgling, twinkling synths and notes. A quietly beautiful track. Is ending. The title track. Ish. This is a 4-minute chunk of the desolate waste ground, the 30-minute warm-up heard at the start of the 8th Touched Music Night a few months prior. Opening with warm synth drones, a lot of layers of sound appear over the top. Warbling, gurgling, synthy noises, windscreen wipers, flutes from Serengeti, bits of Lifeform Ends percussion, this album's opening sounds, electric guitar from some degree of Sanctuary, more flutes and guitars, which I recognise from something but can't remember what, such as the curse of being an FSOL fan in the 2020s, ethereal voices, some muffled percussion from 90s transmissions, and lots of other bits and bobs. It's the most in-your-face atmospheric piece in a very long time, hugely engaging and vast and wonderfully beautiful. Wish a few more minutes, the full half hour had appeared here, but what we're given is still tremendous. Overwrite. We're on to track 5 before we get a hint of the IDM sound, here in the form of quietly clicky beats and squelches. Over these there are the now very familiar Environment 7 layers of pads, squelches and other atmospheric textures. The use of synth strings, the mid-tempo groove and organic feel to the electronic beats all make it feel of a piece with the rest of the album, however, rather than a strange outlier. The rhythms are frequently reversing and collapsing, reasserting themselves and heading into strange territories, making the track feel like a living thing rather than a rigid piece of music. Could maybe do with a little more in the way of melody, but a strong and texturally impressive piece. Closes on nocturnal sounding field recordings and gurgling synth noises. I'm eating here. What are you eating here? A mangy burger, perhaps? God, what a title. Further lending credence to the suspicion that a Mountain Goat re-recording album was in the works, this samples the guitar from that track but rearranges it into an entirely new melody. In place of the background atmospherics of that and both versions of Mountain Path, however, here things are very different, with jazzy drums and electric bass being the foundation of the track, new synth pads and vinyl crackle also added. It seems that no matter what you do with the Mountain Goat guitar, it always ends up beautiful, and this is no exception. A stunning track, one that matches the pensive nocturnal mood of the album, and a real highlight of the Environment 7 trilogy. Of inherent sense. Echoes? Echoes, probably. This is one of those brief, vaguely Frippertronic-esque guitar interludes, but unlike the warmer style of Multiples and This Place, Echoes of Inherent Sense is a very melancholic piece indeed. Flute and synthy bubbles close. Space of Subsequent Familiar. Opening up the final run of tracks, a Space of Subsequent Familiar doesn't seem to have anything in common with the similarly named Space of Partial Illumination. Instead, it's a big warm hug of a track with bouncy round beats, countless major key synth drones, quiet but joyful sounding spoken words, and the usual range of backing samples and textures. Halfway through, things cut back to just the beats, which run the same line as much of the album, halfway between live-sounding breaks and programmed IDM, allowing all the rich synth work to gradually creep up again, with loud synth whooshes and clangs over the top, leading to the piece's climax, which comes in the form of enormous euphoric chiming synth notes. Drift Incline. This picks up directly from Space of Subsequent Familiar with no change in tempo or gap for any environmental ambience, just a 1-2 of fast-paced pieces. Drift Incline brings shade to the mood, however, and adds a tense energy. The first minute adds sharp, plucked arpeggios and a minor key, which still feel in line with those of the previous track, but at 120 the beat properly kicks in with pounding snares that change the tone entirely. As with a lot of the album, and indeed the trilogy, it's rhythm forward, and here is those snares, as well as a lot of other percussive samples that appear throughout, that drive the track. After a brief breakdown for atmospheric synths, the beats come back in once more, keeping the energy going. After 4 minutes, things calm down to sounds from the opening environment of Lifeform's Path 4, oddly enough. These two tracks could have been paired together into a single 9-minute piece and nobody would have been any wiser. Trichome. A lengthy opening environment here with nearly 40 seconds of layers of muttering voices and a tense synth string note. Then in comes the main track, and while we didn't get Northern Point on the trilogy, we did at least get its cousin. Clearly recorded at the same time as that preview piece, Trichome grinds the album's mood to a halt with slow, barely there rhythms, sinister pads, bleeps, and a mournful choral melody. The darkest moment on the album. The credits reference Tales of Ephidrina, with this being supposedly recorded in the analog room. Absence of Solution. Another seamless mix here, with this piece picking straight up from Trichome without any linking environments and a very similar tempo, albeit presented in double time. The now familiar approach of clanging metallic beats, background atmospherics and percussive synth noises is once again present, but here we have a whale or dolphin sounds over the top, bringing to mind hints of the Lifeforms EP once more. The track breaks for a lot of weird sampled sounds before coming back in, topped by a Middle Eastern sounding violin or similar instrument, and then flute notes. Once again, the mix of electronics, samples and acoustic instrumentation feels like a modern update of the band's mid-90s sound, a hugely atmospheric track. Kwahu, possibly named after the Kwahu area and people of Ghana. The vinyl edition of Where All Is Ending's final track is an epic. The drums sound live with a very strange stop-start feel to them that makes them feel improvised and almost tentative, although the straightforward, almost marching rhythm adds a feel of inevitability to the piece. As the album's usual pads and strings build, things might be heading in the usual direction, but the inclusion of odd noises and then staccato string melodies and what sounds like a synth oboe improvisation give a really different feel to the track. Glockenspiel and piano come in, and as electric guitar notes begin to wail, it becomes clear that this is a Gaz epic, and a superb one as usual. Further sound from the Lifeforms EP appears as another nod to the past, and opens up the question as to whether any of this album was originally begun as part of the Lifeforms re-recording sessions, and the epic track reaches an impressive climax, a really great album closer. Ruler. Bonus track time. A bouncy breakbeat launches Where All Is Ending back into the ISDN era mode again, with the usual textures in the background. Weird nasal squeaks appear all over the track, and jazzy piano chords are the main focus, adding to the slight sense of fun. It's certainly the most playful piece on the album. Awkward shape. Muted trumpet, feedback and percussion open, continuing the late 94 vibe, but the beats are glitchy, time-stretched drum machines. Instead of choral-esque pads or thick synth layers, the background here feels more like sinister samples thrown through gloomy reverbs and synthy sweeps fed into delay boxes. As weird, disembodied voices appear in one speaker or another, it's hard not to imagine this as a 2020s version of a Z-Box track, all pitch-black surrealism, gritty noises and knackered drum machines. Brings the CD to a close on a very weird note, as if the album has simply fallen apart. One Solar Radius. The original preview track for the album, and ironically one that appears on neither physical version and also doesn't sound like anything else on the record, to the extent that its appearance feels almost like an afterthought. There's a gap before it and everything. A euphorically happy arpeggio, either guitar or a plucked synth sound, it's hard to fully make out, loops throughout, over which we get bouncy program beats and twinkly synths. Frankly, it wouldn't have been so out of place on either Rituals or Space of Partial Illumination, but here it makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. When played together as a trilogy, it does kind of work as a nice full stop, one that's not quite connected to the music before, but just an upbeat note to end on, mirroring the first album starting on Hopi 8. Nature Sound of London E7 Trilogy. Release date 12th December 2023. A couple of months after the release of the third and final part in the Environment 7 trilogy, all three were released in a standalone single download named E7 Trilogy. The eagle-eyed spotted the download contained an extra track between Rituals and Space of Partial Illumination called X-Tix. The final 6 tracks from 7.2 were missing. Baffling. Look at the track times revealed the origin of the first error. The outro synth environment, Time Cone, had been given its own index, and all the titles accidentally shifted up one, with a new name given to Only in Memories. I brought it to Brian's attention, he quickly sorted it out, naming that additionally indexed environment Cone Sec 9, and adding these 6 missing tracks. At £5 cheaper than the 3 individual albums, it's certainly worth a shot for anyone interested in buying all 3 as downloads. Personally, I think it hangs together as a trilogy about as well as the Environment 6 trilogy does, i.e. 3 very different albums made from the same ingredients, and I have no plans to listen to all 3 in a row again. To me, they're all very different albums, but for those who experience it firsthand like this, I'd be curious to see how they think it hangs together. And that's your lot for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you enjoyed the music. Leave me your thoughts on, well, all of it, especially where all is ending. Environment 7.003. That's the last conventional FSOL album released, so the next 6 videos are going to be all over the place, but at least somewhat logically arranged. Starting next week with Mind Maps 4 and Humanoid's Sweet Acid Sound, and I really hope you'll join me for that video. The final track of the 33rd